What disturbing thing did you learn about someone only after their death? Apparently this story is not uncommon. Brother-in-law's best friend rang him distraught after going through his recently deceased, much older sister's papers. He had discovered that she wasn't his sister as he had thought for the last 70 years. She was his mother. Usual story, teenage pregnancy, went to a convent to have the baby, gave it to mum to bring up. He apparently had a good relationship with her, and he was upset because she couldn't tell him the truth. Watch this video until the end for good luck. I once had a friend whose dad died, and he never really talked about it, but he was pretty troubled. Every year on his death date, they would have a celebration of life party. He invited our friend group one year and we were all excited to be there to support him. Turns out his dad died in a car accident involving a drunk driver. The dad was the drunk driver and also killed the family he hit. After my grandfather's death we were cleaning out his old house and I found an envelope with paperwork that basically said my dad had died by suicide. I had been told as a kid that it was a heart attack. It was a shitty way to find out the truth. My buddy's mom totally killed my buddy's dad. She had taken a $200,000 life insurance policy out on him 6 months before he died, and he died from not taking his medication that he'd taken no problem all of his life. My buddy was away for the weekend so wasn't home when his dad died. After his mom died, we found out she'd taken a life insurance policy out on my buddy at some point too, and she'd also forged his signature to sign over $100,000 my buddy's dad had left to him. She also faked illnesses to get prescription drugs and had little books filled with info on what she'd sold and how much she'd made from selling them. My BIL died in an accident and his wife found out by going through his phone that he was sleeping with several other women, many of whom were pretty close in our friend group and some were also married. It was quite awkward and got pretty messy. One of my best friends died suddenly and clearly didn't have a chance to clean up his affairs beforehand. He had little family, so the group of friends handled everything. We found child porn in his house. Not just a few pieces or somehow accidental. It was in a file cabinet with folders and sorted by ages, sex, etc. Changed everything. That's simply not acceptable. My grandpa had stashed what would be worth millions today and proceeded to convince his family they were poor and had almost no money. His family lived in poverty while he lied to them all. I had a brother who had some paranoid delusions, FBI, CIA following him, spying on his apartment, etc. We, my brothers and I, had tried to get him help and he would just have no part of it. After a few years, it seemed like it had gotten better. He stopped bringing it up and we felt like it must have just passed. After he died, we found his journal and it was just horrifying. Right up until the night he died, he detailed all of the torture that they were inflicting on him. Weird that I can't even write in here. It was just incredibly disturbing to read what a tortured life he was living inside his mind while acting relatively normal outside. That my grandfather molested my mom when she was a child. It started after my grandmother died and ended after he found someone else. I was pretty shocked, especially since my mom didn't seem to carry any kind of baggage from it, though of course I don't know what went and still goes on in her head. Something that made sense though was how she always made sure my brother and I were either in her room to sleep whenever we stayed at grandpa's place, which wasn't too often, or in the room next to hers. We were never alone with my grandfather, and we never had a warm or loving relationship with him. He was cold to us, and we never really got attached to him, and we visited him maybe once a year. I think my mom felt obligated to have a relationship with him for some reason, but she was always very protective of us, and my brother and I were never victims of his. I went through a nasty breakup with my oldest kid's mom that lasted several years. We were never married, and she was crazy as hell, so she told the hospital she didn't know our kid's father, just so she could have leverage over me, you know, like a sane person does. Years later and after several investigations into child abuse she lost custody. Over the next several years we kept getting oddly specific complaints about things going on in my house and my daughter and her stepmom specifically. Dumb like matching clothes or details about how we do timeout. My mom died 2 years ago, and when we switched her Facebook to memorial mode I saw that she had been talking bad about me for years to my ex and was essentially spying on me for her and twisting information. I'm guessing it's because she felt bad for a mother that lost her kid, but it was still a dick move. It's been 2 years, and I still refuse to visit her grave with my siblings and haven't shed a tear for her since. It's disturbing in a way. My great-grandmother went into the military after committing a crime, and in the military she confessed to a judge who punished her by extending her military contract and forcing her to serve in the war. I never knew what happened until way after she died, and I had asked my dad about it. There was a pedophile in her neighborhood who was touching kids, and he was going after boys. My mama mutilated his wank and beat the crap out of him when she saw him try to lift 2 boys. I had a great aunt and great uncle who were full-time missionaries in Africa. After they died, 3 of their grandchildren finally felt safe enough to share that my great aunt and uncle had molested them. That they didn't die when we thought. Here's the deal. My mom was raised by her mom, now 92, and an evil old bat, and her stepfather, who molested her. Where was dad? Died when she was 11, allegedly. That's what my grandmother said. This would have been around 1961. Flash forward to 2015 and my sister is doing genealogy work on the family. Finds out not only did my biological grandfather not die in 1961, he died in 2005 and had 5 more daughters, one of which he gave the same name as my mom. So my mom got cheated out of a potential relationship with her dad by her liar of a mom, who moved and remained hidden from her ex, my mom's real dad. My grandmother moved down to Texas from Virginia to stay in a nursing home and basically make my mom and dad's life hell. We went to visit one weekend and she came over for dinner, and I dropped the bomb on her that we'd figured out she'd been full of shit for 50 years. She then had the nerve to act offended. My dad told her to STFU. Not really disturbing, but definitely raised some questions. When my great Oma passed away last year we found a photo album she had hidden in a closet that was full of photos from World War II. We don't know for sure because she never talked about it, but from the photos it looked like my great Opa was an artsy and they lived quite the lavish life during the war. It caused a bit of a rift in the family, but still, we don't know the actual facts. We do know that my great Opa was captured in France, and when the war ended they came to Canada. Neither of them ever talked about the details. That not only did grandfather physically, emotionally, and sexually abuse me, but also my mother and 2 aunts. And my grandmother knew the whole time and had been confronted by all of them about it, and she did nothing. I still can't look at her the same to this day. He's dead, but the memories aren't, and she refuses to talk about it to this day. I had the best grandpa growing up, like typical movie grandpa. He was perfect. Spoiled us like crazy, great corny jokes, always had crazy silly stories, always saved the day. Just the best man I knew. After he passed, one of my aunts told me and my little sister he had cheated on my grandma with her own sister multiple times. We never knew. Wish she never told us. My grandparents were horrible to my mom. Telling her she deserved other kids hitting her or not believing her when it happened. Telling her good, I'm sick of you anyway, when she threatened to run away. Physical abuse, spending as little money as possible on her, never showing any kind of affection, etc. I never knew them that well, and I'm kinda glad for it, tbh. My grandma, dad's mom, was one of my favorite people before she died when I was 14. She was extremely sweet, generous, and gave good advice. My brother and I stayed with her and were alone with her all the time, and she never mistreated us or in any way acted unusual. I found out only a couple weeks ago at 33 years old that she was a severe alcoholic who would get drunk almost daily up until her death. My dad said she would beat him and his brothers when they were kids, and as adults would still say severely psychologically abusive taunts while grinning at their faces. I never had even the slightest inclination, and this is coming from someone who grew up with an alcoholic stepdad and a near alcoholic mom. When my great-grandmother died, my grandma introduced her half-sister to the family. Apparently my great-grandpa had an affair. The funny thing is that she went to school with my grandma. No one wanted to tell my great-grandma though. My uncle killed himself after he was caught at a bestiality brothel in Nevada. Course we only found out why he killed himself when the police showed up at my parents' house wanting to know if he had any pets at home. He did not. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Let us know your thoughts on this topic. See you soon.